We were both saying how much we enjoyed it, how it is funny and painful, and it sort of follows in a tradition, I suppose, of slightly uncomfortable British comedy. I mean, we got some. I don't know whether it's best to start with the questions that we got in, because I mean they do sort of open things up.
Sure. That's what boring as that is.
Well, I mean, we'll start with the second question. So thank you to Ollie and Holly K for their question. I mean, they started with, how did you come up with the role of David Crawford? Did anyone or anything inspire you?
I think it came to me as an idea that, well, basically I couldn't do anything else. The Fringe wasn't happening. There was nothing else to write for. And it was like, what can I make that feasibly we could just get a couple of cameras on and just go out and do? And in terms of the character, it was, I mean, it's obviously partly due to myself. It's this idea that this guy who wants to work, well, I mean, it's not acting or in comedy, which is what I do, but the idea that he can't go out and do it just by auditioning or getting the job. He has to go out and do it himself. And I think the idea that he's like the sort of domineering dictator of content means that you could just get away with writing anything, basically, providing it's under the umbrella of an idiot who's written it. And yeah, I think that was sort of the main focus, really. I think the main inspiration also is that I've always been fascinated by the line between what the presenter wants you to see and what the reality is. I mean, just like loads of people have done, like, is it Jonathan Pye and all those guys, where suddenly the camera stops and you see what happens afterwards. That line is what I find fascinating. And if you can make a character who's in charge of his own content also deal with people off camera in that way, then I found that fascinating and really fun to play around with.
Because you, I mean, you come from a comedy background. You're also an actor, and is this the natural sort of the merging of the two, a sort of a comedy sketch? I mean, you did the sketch duo Avocado in Edinburgh. In that instance, I think you were taking the piss out of millennials and being sort of app-reliant and that sort of thing. And now you've created a character which is slightly more like middle-aged, maybe. It's sort of slightly more, you know, he's taking the piss. He isn't au fait with the technology and things like that. I wonder to what extent that's you getting older, or whether that's just the vehicle that you've sort of gone with.
Yeah, I mean, it probably is. I mean, you've probably got straight to the crux of it more than I have. I don't know. I think it's really fun to see an oddball surrounded by what is fairly normal circumstances for most of us and not understand it. It's really simple. In fact, it's probably too simple, but it's just, I think it's probably a part of me that also naturally finds progression in society quite amusing, you know, where we've got to, and particularly this year where it's just gone so berserk with all sorts of extremities. Like, I wouldn't expect to be Zoom calling or doing children's Zoom parties every other day like I'm doing at the moment. You know, these sort of, and COVID and dating just created a kind of environment for this. I guess I love the idea that if it were my dad wandering around, he'd be like, what the fuck is going on? Like, why are you doing this? And the only way I could act it was as myself. Obviously I could have cast someone, but then I wouldn't get the part. So had to go and do it myself. Yeah, you're probably absolutely right.
And you mentioned there, you've given some interesting insights into your life of doing kids' Zoom parties.
Yeah.
Is that because of your training in the? Is it? I get the pronunciation wrong. The famous French school.
Okay.
Yes.
No. Well, I wish it were. And you know what? Clowning in Gaulier, which is the clown school I went to, is sort of notoriously brutal and hard. And clowning in that way isn't at all like you'd consider a children's birthday party actor. And just like anyone who's ever been there has spoken about, and there's been some amazing, like, famous actors who've been through there, Sacha Baron Cohen among others, and it's very different. And I think a lot of kids would probably be I think they'd find it funny because it's all very physical comedy. But as in now time, it's not necessarily that physical. I do the odd walk and the odd like facial expression, but No, I do children's birthday parties as a means of getting through COVID and getting paid. But you know, Sharky and George is like a great company that I work for, and they support actors massively. And so there's you know, loads of us out there who manage to get by just by playing games with children. Sadly, it doesn't involve me clowning, and actually, for the parents' sake, they're probably quite pleased it doesn't, because it's probably quite dramatic.
You mentioned Sacha Baron Cohen there, and I think there are many other famous actors who came out of the school. I mean, his improvisation dominates, I think, the scenes in which he creates. Was that the case for yourselves on London Fields, or you know, how much had you scripted?
I think, well, I hadn't done something so improv. I mean, I've done improv before, but in long form and with other actors on stage. But in order to, you know, go out there and just generally see what comes up with people, I'd never done that before. And particularly with the dating coach, Rebecca New, who was incredible. She had no idea. She thought I was a genuine, you know, reporter. And I didn't know what was going to come out of it. But what I think, I think what was more difficult is just, I guess, keeping that line between realism. Like, what I find interesting in comedy is what I find to be realistic, and that's why things like The Thick of It, or even originally it's probably from The Office. It's like everything that I feel like is believable, I find like hilarious in those awkward circumstances. Sacha Baron Cohen, for example, like traditionally he's been a complete genius and a wonder in this field. But equally, I think if it came out now, a lot of those things, like Borat 2, I wouldn't necessarily believe it entirely. And so a lot of this program was like straddling reality with how absurd can I be? And I think next time I'd have a lot more confidence, but this is my first time, and I had to just like tentatively like push and see what I could get out of people. For example, like with Rebecca, and we've got hours of stuff with me on London Fields, and there's so much funny stuff, but it's you know, you've got to build this character slowly. She
thought you were real. She thought but not throughout. I mean, what initially she thought you were? No,
throughout. Even, I mean, at the end, she did say to me at one point when I asked her to rate my face, for example. I did say at the end, she goes, "That was a bit tongue in cheek, the whole rating thing. So I feel really bad that I rated you only a 7 or a 6 or something." But no, generally, I mean, she at the end she was like, "So when's this current affairs program going out?" And to be fair to her, towards the end, I think she did start to cotton on a bit, because I was acting, you know, completely insane, like, you know, picking up car keys and showing that I had a Mini outside, which clearly. And she's great, and she was an incredible sport, and totally hats off to her that she stayed with me for so long.
We've got another question in. Because maybe we could answer the ones that came in first, just quickly. Yeah, so did you interview real people in the dating coach, an actual dating coach? So you said yes. So that's again from Ollie and Holly. And you kept it together on the set, I presume, because she thought you were for real. I think we'll move on to this one. Question, we don't have a name, but dating in COVID has been a nightmare. What dating app would David Crawford recommend, and why?
What would David Crawford recommend? Do you know what? I couldn't say what David would say. I imagine it would be something where it was, I think something like Bumble or Hinge is actually quite good, because it asks him about his perspective, and I think that's what he really wants to get across most of the time. Every subject matter he delves into is not really about what he's trying to get out of it. He's just trying to get what he believes out there. So anything that asks him questions on the interface, that would be his 1-1. So they could, you know, so he could just tell them about what he thinks.
And you said that before we went live, you mentioned that you'd hope to include the dating coach a bit more. If we go back again to Ollie and Holly's third question, what are your future plans for Now Time TV? If I also put in are David Crawford's ideas for the future, I think his ones were, what were they? Pornography was one of them. Rural what was it? Rural crime, gypsies, pornography, and diversity, not the dance group. Yeah. For a second episode, what's the future?
Well, actually, in hindsight, I think since we've made it, we've started to think about things that we would imagining where this character can be sort of almost ridiculed the most. Social media, I think, is obviously a really easy one, but also him trying to perfect social media to raise his profile, I think would be really funny. So, for example, sending him to meet TikTokers in a TikTok house, and learning how to do that, and meeting a lifestyle influencer who shows them his like exercise regime followed by his morning lunch. Even something really simple like that, providing they believe this guy and they're real people, I think could be really funny.
And Rose, do you have anything before I don't want to?
Just, I just wondered, just curious, how far did you go with the people in London Fields? Did you ever let on that it wasn't real, or did you just leave them thinking that you genuinely were trying to make a current affairs programme?
I tried my best to keep it as real as I could. There were a couple of people who started to question it and be like, are you being real? And then I would just get shitty and be like, well, fuck you if you don't think I'm being, and then I would leave. And that we've got some lovely shots of me walking away from people while they just look pretty confused. I mean, there was one group of people that were having a big party dressed with like cowboy outfits and like really flamboyant dress. And I just basically asked them if I could switch outfits to get involved. And so there's one thing with me with like some weird belt around my nipples, and me just trying to get involved in this party. But we just thought he would never put, it was just too unrealistic. It wouldn't go in, it wouldn't fit in the program. But yeah, there were a couple of people who started to be like, is this like a character thing you're doing? And then just learning to scale it back from there, just to try and keep it real.
Also, casting, obviously the producer who played the producer, she was great. So how did you come across, did you just do sort of an open casting, or did you have people in mind? Or
so no, Nikki was played by a friend of mine, a friend Holly, who I got put in touch with. She was actually incredible because she actually humoured me with the script back in like June or July when I'd come up with it. And we were just sending scripts back and forth. She was also into a competition, a script writing competition. And then it just really made sense. It just worked. And do you know what? We'd never actually met before, apart from over Zoom. So then when we got there on the day and we started recording, like filming, she was just incredible. And then pretty much since all the takeaway everyone's had has been like, wow, she really holds, she's incredible. She holds it together. And I think moving forward in every episode that we're going to be doing, it's probably going to be more from her perspective, so that this character fits into her story as opposed to the other way around, because I think she's the one that the audience can really believe in, whereas I don't think David Crawford is like that, to be honest. So yeah, she's brilliant.
Is it something that you see just being online, or do you hope that it might be
Yeah, I wouldn't mind if it was just online. I think, to be honest with you, it's such a struggle for anyone in our industry right now. No one's got any money. This was something that everyone just pulled together and did just out of the fun of the project. And so if there were an opportunity to do anything, it's more just to develop and write and make more. Regardless of whether it's online or on TV, I think we'd just be really happy to be able to make more. But sadly, that does need money. I mean, we got the first one under the wire just from using friends and favors. And I don't think we'll be able to do that again. So hopefully it just mean that if we can make more, we'll be pretty happy. Yeah.
I have a slightly incidental question, because I quite liked the fact that you had the Top Gear ringtone as David's ringtone. I bet you had a couple of other thoughts about what could you use as that. I was wondering what the second or third options were for what you could use as the ringtone.
The second one was it was like that operatic British Airways piece of music. Do you know what I'm talking about? I don't know if we can play it.
I don't know. I mean, I think I know what you mean. From the adverts.
Yeah, exactly. I'm trying to. Yeah, it was a British Airways. Da, 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 da. That kind of thing. Yeah. And I think that was really great. And actually Matt Pochettino, who edited this whole thing together, just out of the kindness of his heart, he came up with that, and it was great. But we just thought Top Gear would be quite a funny route to go down. But yeah.
Any other third ones?
No, we haven't got any third ones. Wish I did.
And so, I mean, how much do you worry about? I was going to ask you to what extent you might have thought you might want to make the character more edgy or sort of more because there is, you are following the footsteps of some big names in terms of sort of mockumentary making, and that's sort of in a similar sort of style. I wondered to what extent you were wary of that, and to what extent you might have been trying to, well, how you might avoid accidentally slipping into.
Every bit of British comedy has kind of been built on the shoulders of these giants, and just like People Just Do Nothing is so much like Brent. I think this is very much like Partridge and Brent, and I in hindsight, I totally think it would have been great if he was a bit more edgy. I think we had a few weeks to scramble this together, and we were just like, yeah, that sounds great. I mean, who is weird enough to act like this? And in my mind, it was someone who was brought up in a homeschooled environment with a military dad, and that was what just made sense to me. And I don't think that's necessarily fact. It's just what at the time we were like, yeah, let's just go with it. However, moving forward, I think if we readapt this and work on it properly to pitch as a pilot, I think you're absolutely right. We wouldn't pitch it in that way. We would want to at least make it a feasible character, and then maybe there's a slightly more, I guess, systemic reason in his background that permits him to act in that way. Not necessarily that he is just an old school character, because clearly, most people who are that of my age know that isn't okay to act like that.
Yeah, I suppose if you're making a pilot, you do sort of want to make it sort of more general, and if you went too far down one route, you might sort of cut down your opportunities to take it elsewhere. So I can see why it is sort of a kind of broad opener, and we all thought it was hilarious, and it's been very popular with everyone that's been watching it. I think we've got we had the 2-minute warning, and I just want to double check that unless you've got anything else, Rose, I just check the emails again to make sure nothing else has come in.
No, I don't think I want to read.
Are you writing at the moment, or are you sort of planning to go into production anytime soon?
Yeah, we're kind of rewriting. Well, we're writing for what would be a treatment for a series, even if it would be online. But we're working with a team at the moment who have shown it to, who like it, and we're just working on making it right for pitching at the moment. I love it as a standalone project, and I'd love to make more, but equally I want to make it right, and I feel like we've got a lot of work to do. But it was a really fun experience, and yeah, a lot of it is just about honing the narrative to make more sense at this stage.
I think we've got a quick last question. It is, what is David Crawford's Christmas tipple?
What's his tipple? It's probably something that he feels is really pretentious. Oh no, sorry, is really classy, but is just a bit rubbish, I think. So I don't know. Name that what you will. Possibly I don't know. Cinzano, something like that.
Yeah, I can imagine that. I can also imagine there's a bit of a, I don't know, sherry drinker as well.
I was going to say sherry.
Sherry, and he's got a rank sherry mouth when he talks to people. I mean, yeah, I'm just basing that on experience.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Dave, for speaking with us, and thank you for sharing your creation with us, because it's been a really nice comedic change of pace for the rest of the festival, and we've all really enjoyed it. So thank you for joining us.
That's all right. And I will just say we actually produced most of it in Camberwell. I didn't say that at the beginning. Despite having done it in London Fields, most of it was produced at the producer Barnaby Fry's house, which is literally up Camberwell Grove. So, I mean, it was instrumental in actually forming this idea. Otherwise, I'd have been stuck at home with my folks, because it's been such a disaster of a year. So it's all thanks to Camberwell.
Lovely. Well, thank you.
All right.